Namaste. Welcome to all of you, and thank you very much. Before I start this session, I just Urushi had asked one question. What is the difference between moksha and nirvana? I don't think I had answered it correctly, and or rather satisfactorily. Yeah, and I kept on, mulling over it till yesterday morning, early in the morning at about 4:35. I got the answer. I had to only check up the dictionary, nothing more. That, of course, tells you that your knowledge of Sanskrit is very poor. But I took out the Sanskrit dictionary and checked up both the words. Moksha is formed out of two words. One is moksha, mo, and the other is kasha. Mo means attachment, and the kasha means destruction. So the moksha really stands for destruction of your attachment or elimination of your attachment when you're no longer attached. Attached to what? Attached to your ego, really, your desires and your vasanas and desires. These will persist with you even after what we call death, and they remain with us, and they keep on. They are the cause for our birth and rebirth. Nirvana has got is of again made out of two words, nir and van. Nir means no, and van is voice or sound or even energy. Voice, primarily voice, like Bani's name, that one. So you've got that vani or van, which means voice or sound, and the other it also stands for form. The nirvan means without form and without sound, which is same thing. Now, what is it without sound? Without sound is when your mind is absolutely quiet. That is when you're absolutely quiet, when you have no desires. When you have no desires, then you're not going to be reborn again, which is the same thing as moksha. If you have no desires, which is there won't be any attachment, then you won't be reborn again. So in fact, both these words, they are two different Sanskrit words, but they mean exactly the same thing. Only thing is that nirvana perhaps is a more, you can say, expresses the Buddhist approach a little more directly. Although उसमें भी आप देखिए, when it comes to moksha in Vedanta or even at Sankhya or any other Hindu philosophy, there moksha means you're not going to be reborn again. Now, when you're not going to be reborn, you become your own self. That self is the unmanifested Brahman. Now, the moment it is unmanifested, it means that it, for all practical purposes, is not there, which is what the Buddhist shunya is about. When they say shunya, it means it is not there. There's nothing. There was a flame or something, and that flame is extinguished. Now, in that place of the flame, all that is left is the एक void रह गया है. So, really speaking, from both point of view, it represents the same thing. One says that it is a void, shunya, and the other says it is unmanifested Brahman. Now that is the truth. Of course, the truth has to be same, expressed differently by two different people, but nevertheless they convey the same thing. And it's that nirvana hai, chahe, or it is moksha. They are both identical things. They convey the same meaning, the same sense. I thought this is a better answer, and I better share with Urushi, especially since she asked that question. Right. Now, coming to our subject proper, we had last time, on the last occasion, we had stopped at Draupadi's Kanyadan. We had seen how Draupadi had been sort of won over by Arjun. Then she had gone to, she had accompanied the brothers to where they were staying, and they took their blessing to take the blessings of their mother, and how the mother had said that you share whatever you've got. So based upon that, okay. Before that, when her father came to know that it is Arjun who had been the successful uh, suitor, so he invited all of them, Kunti and the five brothers, and of course Draupadi accompanied them back to stay with them at their palace in Kampilia. And it is there that he had performed the Kanyadan. He had invited everybody from Hastinapur also, the king, Drishtas, but Drishtas didn't come. He sent only Vidur and he sent Kripacharya, these two people, to represent him at the wedding of Draupadi, his daughter, with the five brothers. Now, only thing is that Bani had said, we can't really like the idea of that five brothers and all that, we're getting married to five people. These are all metaphors. I had explained what the metaphor means. So you have to take everything is not happening outside you. It is everything is happening within you. When it takes it within you, then you get a different picture altogether. Then it is better. Then you don't get that kind of feeling that this is not right. That it should not be there. How can we accept it? All the things disappear when you consider that these are all metaphors. Okay. Now going forward from this point where we ended last time. When Krishna, who was also there at Kampilia, he decided to go and pay his respects to Kunti. Kunti was his Bua, his father's sister. And Kunti was sister of Vasudev, Krishna's father. Now, they had not met for quite some time, ever since Krishna was a child. And Kunti had left her home and she had not seen Krishna for a long, long time. And so when Krishna went to Kunti, he introduced himself and told her that I've come to, the moment I came to know that you're here, I thought I'd come and pay my respects to you. Kunti looked at him, Krishna, very fondly and said, "Oh yeah, the butter stealer." As a little child, he used to be called a butter stealer, and then she looked at him and said, "Yes, your yellow amber really defines you, and your peacock feather crown seems to be integral with you, and it looks so pretty as as the wind blows or the breeze blows it against you, moving the breeze." Now these are all metaphors. Ye sab usme. What is this? His peacock feather crown. Human emotions are represented, are expressed through our face, and even in our face, the facial features to hai hai, but even in our face, it is the eyes which are most expressive. They can express fear, anger, love, hatred, jealousy, whatever. All these are expressed through the eyes. And the crown and the jewel amongst all these expressions or feelings is love. The eye in the peacock feather represents the devotee's love. And this is the only jewel that he wears in his crown. The swaying of the peacock feather represents the bliss that the Krishna Lord enjoys when he has his devotee's love with him, which he wears as his crown. As far as Ambar is concerned, Ambar is also stands for the covering. It stands for covering. It can stand for the sky, but it also stands for clothing. The dhoti which the men wear, that's also called Ambar. Krishna's Ambar used to be always yellow. Yellow stands for devotion. And here, as a metaphor, it means that the Lord only wears his devotee's devotion around him, with which he covers himself. Then Krishna, when Kunti had remarked about his yellow ambar and his peacock feather, Krishna had said, "Yes, aunt, yes, Bua. And if you see, I am never without my flute. I always carry my flute with me. His flute was what is this flute? This flute is his devotee, which has completely surrendered to him. And the music or the music that he plays from the flute is the life of the devotee, the song of his devotee's life. Krishna, like he says, I'm never without my flute. He always carries his devotee along with throughout his life, taking care of all his needs and wants. Never let him commit any karma, so that at the end of his life, which is absolutely, he's liberated and merges in Krishna himself. So that is the whole metaphor about Krishna. Now, Krishna, when he came to Kampilia to pay his respects there, naturally he met his cousins also. They were all his Bua's daughter, Bua's children, sons. And as far as these Pandavas were concerned, Krishna was their maternal cousin, their mama's son. Now, this relationship between the person and mama or mama's son is very important in it used to be very important. It still is important in certain parts of the country. In fact, all over the country. If you recall, the bride is always given away by mama, not by anybody. Carried by to the uh, to the to the pandal by the mama. He is the one who carries her. तो उसका एक significance है. We'll come to that little later, not at this point in time. It'll come in further also. So Krishna is like a celestial guru. See, this guru comes into your life very, very casually. You don't even realize that a guru has come into your life. But once he comes into your life, he takes complete charge of you. And thereafter, he guides you, prevents you from doing anything wrong. Hold, if any misfortune, something is going to fall upon you, then that too he takes care. He will prevent you from harming yourself, both physically and spiritually. He is an absolute guardian angel. So that guru remains with you. Initially, he will not even talk about any spiritual matters. He may, if you keep on pestering him, he may give you some answers, but primarily that answer will be to keep you quiet so that you don't get enmeshed with him and don't discuss something which is wrong. Only when you're right, then the guru will come forward and start gently, slowly uh, sharing with you what the truth is and preparing you. It may also happen that once a guru comes into your life, and because it's a physical form, the person may not be spiritually so advanced. So the guru will may hand you over to some other form. It's not that the guru changes, it is only that the form changes. The guru remains the same. And eventually, of course, the time will come when the Lord himself will be your guru. And that guru is always within you. And once you come to realize that the guru is within you, and you can always, he's always approachable to you when you discuss heart to heart, like Swami says, is speak to me from heart to heart. When you are able to discuss with your guru from heart to heart, then there's no need for the guru to be physically present. That time he just disappears. Or he will, if you still need him occasionally, he'll call you. But initially, he is just very casual. You can discuss him all kinds of mundane matters, mundane things about friends, about food, about dressing, about clothing, about visiting this place, that place. All mundane things. You won't realize that in fact, I remember uh, once, first time when I had come across, I don't know, yeah, I think you'll have to call him only Guru, Maharishi Manu in my life. That was before any other spiritual giant had come to in my life. He was the first one. And in the 4 meetings, normally he used to, discuss with people their problems, and in 2-3 minutes they'll send them off. But in my case, we kept on discussing for about half an hour on every session. And all that I remember about him, that we discuss about, not discuss, he used to tell stories about Birbal and Akbar and other stories. So you can see that they don't really, you don't feel that he's come to teach you something, because you will simply rebel if you're not properly prepared at that time. You're not going to like it and you're going to run away from it. So the guru does not try to drive you, he will try to bring you toward the fold. But he does it so gently, so casually that you don't really realize it. Anyway, when Krishna met Arjun and the others, he told Arjun, uh, when I saw you, even though you're dressed disguised as a Brahmin, I could see that it was you. I could recognize you. Of course, these cousins had not met earlier. Arjun tells him, though I've never met you, but you seem somewhat familiar. And Krishna replies, you see, we have known each other uh, for in several lifetimes earlier. And so naturally you have a feeling of familiarity. Arjun could not really appreciate what Krishna was talking about. And but he could sense that there's something more to this Krishna than he appears to be. He appears to be an ordinary person like his cousin, that's all. But there's something more to Krishna than it meets the eye. Now, the memory of Krishna's memory and Arjun's memory, they're two different things. Memory of every human being is, so to say, starts from the day he is born and it continues there. At death, whatever memory he has got is generally wiped off, and again at a clean state he starts again. Now this is quite good because if you carry all your past memories, then it becomes impossible for you to function. For example, you have got some relatives today. You may be husband or wife or something, and you maybe have children. And when you die and you're reborn, then you're reborn as a little baby or a little child. And all your past children, they themselves may be old people. So how do they relate with you? And then secondly, there may be different situations in the next birth. The situation may completely change. So what nature has done is nature generally cleans, completely erases all the past memories which you've got. And that's a good thing. Otherwise, it will be impossible to live. And there are cases of children, uh, you know, who remember their past life. In fact, in one case, a child of 6-year-old remembered not only her past life, where she was the wife of some one person, and she was about 46 years old herself, or 40 years old, and her husband was about 50 by that time. So when she went there as a 6-year-old and told him that I'm your wife, and I can't, of course, that man could not replace this little girl as his wife. And this little girl's children also were much older, about 25, 20, 30 years old. So that kind of problems may be there about placement. And generally, what it has been seen, those children who remember their past life, if they are unable to get over that memory quickly, then they are not able to live very long. Anyway, as far as Krishna Arjun was concerned, he felt that he had known him, but he didn't really recall anything from his past life. And memory, of course, is very useful, very useful. But Krishna's memory is little different. Krishna's memory was continuous. He not only knew this life, but all his previous life. The difference was that as far as Krishna was concerned, he did not identify himself with the character which he had played in his earlier life. So all his memory was in the form of a cinematographic, as a cinema reel or film, you know, a movie film, which all that he had to do was to see and sit back and dispassionately see what is happening. But he was not attached to it. On the other hand, every other human being, including Arjun, they are all attached to the role that they are playing. When they are attached to the role that they are playing, then the problems arise. If on the other hand you are just a witness, then there's no problem. Okay, then you are only an actor. Otherwise, you are not really an actor. If you are playing the role, if you don't realize that you're playing only a role, then you become the doer. So that karta, what they call. And that creates a problem because the doer is the one which is responsible for your birth and rebirth. So Krishna's memory is memory which is continuous, but it is memory of a witness. Arjun's memory is in discontinuous. Each lifetime is separate. But in here, although it is discontinuous, uh, it is a memory of a doer. See, so whatever you're doing in this life, although you may not be remembering anything of a past life, but in this life, whatever you're doing, you keep on accumulating karma. Unlike Krishna, although he is doing everything, he is also living his life, but he is not accumulating karma because all his memories are memory of a witness. He does everything as a witness, whereas Arjun does everything as a doer. These are two different things, and very important thing. When Arjun and this Krishna, then just a minute. What is it? Yeah. After this the meeting, then by that time, everybody has come to know that the Pandavas were alive. If you recall, after the house of that Lakshagriha, which was burned down, it was everybody at first, everybody thought that the five Pandavas and their mother had been killed, had been burnt to death. And so they, of course, everybody is very sad, including Dhritarashtra. We really felt very sad about the death of those things. But fortunately, these people had not died. They had escaped before the house was set on fire. And when Dhritarashtra came to know that they were alive, then on the advice of Vidur, it was, Dhritarashtra was advised to call the Pandavas there, and especially Draupadi, because she was supposed to be, she would be their future queen. So on that basis, Dhritarashtra extended an invitation to the five Pandavas and Draupadi, and Dhritarashtra decreed that Draupadi should be welcomed as the future queen. The only thing is that when from Kampilia, which is where the wedding took place, they went to Hastinapur. There was a problem for Dhritarashtra because when the news of the five brothers and Kunti had died in that, or rather had been burnt to death in that Lakshagriha, then on the advice of Vidur, Duryodhan was declared the heir apparent and the crown prince. Now there was already one crown prince there, but Yudhishthir was the original crown prince, and he is not dead, so you can't have two crown princes. So it was then again on the advice of Vidur and with the concurrence of Bhishma, Dhritarashtra decided to divide his kingdom into two parts and give one part to Yudhishthir, and the other part he would retain himself with Duryodhan as the crown prince, so that the two crown princes could be separated. And not only that, because you can't have one crown prince, two crown princes. So what he said was that Yudhishthir will now function independently as the king of that place. Now the place which was given to Yudhishthir and the Pandav brothers was called Khandapras. Khandapras, Khand means a region or a zone or a region like Uttarakhand, northern region. Khand also, unfortunately, not unfortunately, Khand also is from Khandar, which means that it is ruins. So this is again a metaphor. The Dhritarashtra dividing his kingdom into two parts. He keeps the fertile part, Hastinapur, with himself, and gives the barren part, which is full of ruins and where nothing grows, to these five Pandav brothers, to Yudhishthir. So, but anyway, as far as Yudhishthir was concerned, he was always very, grateful, and he accepted always whatever his uncle Dhritarashtra said and did. He never raised any objection to whatever it is. However, from there, when these five brothers, along with Krishna, they went to Khandapras, the youngest, Sahadev, he was aghast. He said, "What is this place where we have to live?" Nakul, his elder brother, was also aghast. He said, "There's nothing here except ruins." Bhim, who was there, he said, "Our uncle has been very unjust. He has kept the fertile part for himself and Duryodhan and given us all this infertile and barren place." Yudhishthir, who was listening to this thing, he said, If you recall, although Krishna was merely their cousin, maternal cousin, and what he thought was a kind of a good friend, nevertheless, Arjun had some kind of a intuitive feeling that Krishna is not just an ordinary human being. There's something more than what it appears to the eye. So he said that I only take it as Krishna's blessing. Krishna said, yes, this is your karma bhumi. Go out here and build a Hastinapur more glorious than the one which you already left. Bhim, on the other hand, he said, how can that be Krishna? This Hastinapur is thousands of years old. It is the most powerful nation in the whole world, and it has been built over thousands of years, and it has got such glorious things. And this is only a barren place, and we don't have even the facilities. And how can we start and compare ourselves with build a palace better than a place better than Hastinapur? There are only five of us, etc. But Arjun said, no, no, let us not worry about it. Let us take this as Krishna's grace and do our best. Krishna said, yes, this is what you have to do. You have this, your Hastinapur. You have to build your place which is better than Hastinapur. Anyway, so this is again, the Khandapras is a metaphor. The movement of when you go to Dhritarashtra or one who attachment, then attachment will only lead towards destruction. That is the meaning of that metaphor. When you're attached, then you're bound to move toward destruction only. So that's why all your saints have been telling us that you give up attachment, don't get attached to anything. Now, Khandapras, what is Khandapras? It's not it. Khandapras is the deadening of the heart. You see, yoga heart, normally that heart is very compassionate, very generous, very soft, very tender, and very alive. It is very empathetic to whoever it comes across. And you find that somebody is suffering, then the heart will automatically, without her realizing it, it will go out, try to help the other chap. But when your heart is dead, then of course you don't feel any compassion toward the whoever it is. And this is what that Khandapras means, that there's a complete deadening of the heart. When there's a complete deadening of the heart, then you keep on indulging in violence. For no rhyme or reason. All these psychopaths, serial killers, they come into this category. They are the ones, for no rhyme or reason, they'll keep on killing people. And of course, sometimes even it's organized. Not only killing people, indulging all the vilest of the things. Like, for example, you catch an innocent girl and rape her. Now, it's that kind of thing that is done by when your heart is completely dead. When your heart is dead, it may also be on the other side. Instead of violence, you may absolutely become indifferent. When you become indifferent, then nothing matters. How does it matter? What is this? What is that? Then you take to drugs and drinks, and you get addicted. And you really don't bother. Not only, and you completely destroy yourself. So when you're attached, like Dhritarashtra, then you are bound to end up in a complete destruction of yourself. Now, how to get rid of? Okay, complete. Just a minute. Yeah, the five Pandav brothers, they had each of them had reacted differently. Normally, when you see something something unpleasant against us, we are always full. We start complaining, like Nakul had done, Sadev had done, Nakul had done, even Bhim had done. That this is not good, and we have been dealt with the wrong hand, or which is not correct. On the other hand, when you're dealt with a good hand, you don't complain. You assume it's your due. But this is a normal reaction which everybody. Arjun, on the other hand, was different. He saw everything as glass half full. He never considered that anything wrong is there. And yes, whatever it may be, we have to we have to start from there, move forward from there. And when Krishna says that you have to build the Hastinapur, now what is Hastinapur? Hastinapur, if you recall very early in the beginning of itself, I had mentioned that there are, we are moved by our tendencies, all of us, our entire Prakriti, the form which we have got, has got three traits: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. These three traits are one which decide how do we act, react, or whatever. This forms our character, and this is how we will uh, live our life. Now, this when we are driven only by our these three, our nature, this part of our nature. When you're driven by nature, and then it will keep on recurring like this. We'll keep on spending our life. We keep on living our life, which is mechanical, which is really no, to which we have not given a thought. It happens by itself. All this kind of this life is a kind of happening. It is just happening of its own. There's no really effort on. Although we think we are taking decisions, we are not really taking a decision. The three traits, the three gunas which are there within us, they keep on driving us, moving us towards this. And really speaking, to most of the people, we don't even think we have a free will. We think we have a free will, but we don't. We really keep on moving as per dictates of our nature. Arjun, on the other hand, said that no, this is Krishna's blessing, and let's move forward from here. Now, this can happen only when you're able to, when your heart is so strong that you're able to see that, or rather get ahead of whatever you have been dealt with. If it's an unsatisfactory hand, okay, it is unsatisfactory hand, that will move forward from here and build it. So, Hastinapur, Bhima had already said that the Hastinapur has been there in existence for thousands of years. And how could you expect us to build something better so quickly? Krishna merely replied, excuse me. Krishna merely replied that no, in spite of that, with Parishram and Sangharsh, you can build a Hastinapur, which is better than the one which you have already left. Now, Parishram, of course, means effort, and Sangharsh means struggle. But Sangharsh also means is made out of two words, Sang and Harsh. Sang means the Sang means company, and Harsh means delight. When you are in the company of people of same like-minded people, and you take delight in that company, then that is Sangharsh. Now, this Sangharsh is primarily, just for example, we are having this satsang. This satsang is a kind of Sangharsh where we take delight in each other's company. Now, which is the company we should take delight in, which is really very beneficial to us? It is the company of God. God or God, or those who are devoted to God, or those who are moving towards God, those who are trying to move towards God. That company of those people we find delight in. And when you have this kind of company and you take delight in God and all matters connected to God, then that gives you some extra power. And as we have seen, devas are there. They also help you in achieving this. And very quickly, you're able to build a Hastinapur, which is much better than the one which you have left. Here, of course, it was a very barren place, which was full of ruins. Anyway, they said that let us start. We'll have to start somehow and forget about whatever has happened. Khandapras, however, not only barren, in Khandapras live lots of these Nagas. And in Khandapras also lived Agni. Agni wanted to devour uh, these Nagas, etc. But every time Agni made any effort, Indra, who was the lord of the thunder and rain, He was a good friend of the king of the Nagas, Takshak, and he would immediately request Indra, and Indra would send his clouds and heavy rain, and they'll completely douse the fire. So when the Pandavas went there, Agni approached them as a Brahmin and said, I need your help. He said, what is it? He said, see, I'm very hungry. I've not had any food for a very long time. And every time I make an effort to get food, Indra, Lord Indra, he comes to the rescue of these denizens here, and they all escape because I can only set fire, but they don't get killed. So I'm very hungry. And Arjun tells him tells that Brahmin, who's nothing but Agni, that look, we don't have adequate weapons. If you can provide some good weapons, then certainly we'll be able to do some, we'll be able to help you. Now, it was here, then Agni says, okay, I'll do that. And then Agni gives Arjun a bow, which was called Gandiv. This was the place where Arjun gets his famous bow, which is Gandiv. Sorry, my throat is getting parched. He also gives Arjun a quiver, which is a magical quiver, in which there's a continuous supply of, inexhaustible supply of arrows. Whatever arrows he wanted, he'll keep on getting all kinds of arrows, in the quiver. It will always be there. It will never remain. It will never become empty. So with those two things, then as far as Krishna was concerned, Krishna was also given some weapons. He was given the Sudarshan Chakra, and he was also given a mace. These two things was given by Agni to Krishna. Agni really is all our effort, at all our sadhana and spiritual practice. The more the intensity, the more this effort that we put in, the more our confidence will increase. That Gandhi is nothing but self-confidence. And that self-confidence you get from your effort, your parishram, or your own effort, personal effort. That is the meaning of this little metaphor here. Of course, as far as Krishna is concerned, he is God really. And although he has taken a human form, so he is given a weapon, and he is not just a God, he is an avatar of Lord Vishnu. So he is given a weapon which Lord Vishnu himself uses, which was a chakra. Sudarshan chakra means that Sudarshan chakra is a chakra which gives you a good darshan. And Sudarshan chakra normally associate with somebody, we have in the stories we have heard that Krishna or even Vishnu, if he hurls that chakra towards somebody, he just chocks and removes his head and they kill that person. But really, God is never interested in killing or destroying anything or anybody. God is really interested in uplifting whoever that person is. So Sudarshan chakra, that is what he means, good darshan. Good darshan is a darshan of heaven. So whoever is killed by God, you can rest assured that kind of benefit or that kind of privilege nobody has. And he is assured of a place in heaven.